Showing you Respondents Exhibit 9 starts at ERD 329 through 330. Do you recognize this email?
Yes.
We don't have that one yet, do we?
No, this is the new one.
Okay.
Sorry.
You said it's ERD 330?
It starts at 329
Okay,
through 330.
thank you.
Do you recognize that, Ms. Anderson?
I do.
Can you tell us what this is?
Yes. So following our conversation with Kathy, I wanted to make sure that I put the expectations in writing for her so that there was no gray area. Sometimes it seemed as though Kathy wasn't 100% clear about what the expectations were. So for this reason, I put all of our expectations and conversation that we had and directives about who to call for what and what she should do in one email for her reference.
And that's the one that goes on to 330?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I just don't know what to call this. What do we want to call this? Emails to and from Miss Anderson to the complainant?
Complainant regarding expectations.
All right, I've marked that as Respondents Exhibit number 12, ERD 329 to 330. It's been marked, it's been offered. Any objection, Attorney Olson?
No objection.
Hearing no objection, it's admitted.
After you had issued Ms. Duchow Cross the corrective action, was there an issue involving herself? She removed herself from the call calendar.
That's correct.
What happened there?
So I sent Kathy an email to ask her a question about her time because at that point I was responsible for ensuring that her time was entered correctly. So my question to her was, what on-call hours did you have? And Kathy said, whatever's in the system. And I said, again, I need you to explain to me what hours you had. I believe there's an email trail with this information because she was, again, being very vague about what she had worked that week. At no time did she say, well, you already know I'm not taking call anymore. Instead, she just kept telling me that what was in the system was correct and there was nothing in the system. So once I spelled it out, I think we went back and forth about 3 times. Once I spelled it out to her, I need to hear from you. Did you have call this last payday? And she said, again, what I entered or what is in there is what's correct. And I said, I just need a yes or no. I don't know if you know what's in there. How would I know what's correct? And then at that point, she said, no, I didn't take any call. So my next question, of course, with her leader was, were you aware that she was not taking any more call? Or is that something that she's communicated to someone else? Even though she had been told she had to communicate with me regarding schedule changes, I hadn't heard it, but my assumption would have been maybe she called someone else. No one else was aware that she was not taking call anymore.
And
Well,
So
how
when
does
did
that
that-
happen? I mean, if the emergency room calls and she's it, you just say, too bad, too sad, I'm not coming in?
Well, it's a huge safety issue for our patients. If someone is coming in and they have domestic violence or just sexually assaulted and they need care and we don't have anyone, then we have to find another place that we can send them to, or another nurse to come in and help care for them. And it definitely causes a delay in care for the patient. What she told me was that, well, the emergency room knows that I'm not on and they know what to do. And I said, well, I'm your leader, not the emergency room.
Okay.
Did you know that Ms. Duchow Cross was planning on removing herself from the call calendar and not taking any more call?
I had no knowledge of this.
What was your reaction? You know, give her the corrective action. You're working through these issues, and then, unbeknownst to you, she removed herself from the call calendar.
I felt that it was a direct violation of what I had sent to her as far as expectations, which was to communicate any changes in her schedule with me.
But as far as what was your reaction in terms of impact on the department or
I
impact
was
on
shocked.
potential
I mean,
victims?
when you think about what puts our patients at risk and what things are concerning, having no one to care for patients is a concern. We want to avoid that at all cost. So to just take herself off of the schedule without communicating with anyone just made no sense to me.
All right, I want to circle back now to the issue with the law enforcement officer's iPad or Surface Pro, whatever it was. So what information exactly was it that you obtained subsequent to writing the corrective action level 3 that led that to be further investigated by you?
So as I was presenting that level 3 to her, and I read the line about that could have been documented on a body map, her response was it wasn't something I could document. I asked more probing questions, and that is how I learned that she was to be comparing two penises, one from a digital image that law enforcement had, and the other one from the image that she had taken. When I asked more questions about how the images left our department, she was rather vague about that, did not provide direct information as to whether or not she sent the officer outside of our hospital with those images on his device, or whether or not she had sent them secured to that individual. She said, I'll have to do more digging. I don't believe I would have let him leave with those.
And did you do further investigation beyond just what additionally you learned during the presentation of the corrective action, like afterwards?
So then I reached out to the law enforcement officer that was actually involved and spoke with him. And that is when he told me that he did indeed leave the hospital with the images on his iPad. And that meant that now we had these unsecured images going. Certainly privacy concerns for our patient are a big concern. And following a level 3, that's a big issue.
When is it that you realize that there is a HIPAA violation here?
When her and I actually had a conversation about it, and she did inform me that she had a release of information from this individual to
I'm sorry,
share.
when is this conversation? Is it after you had delivered the corrective action 3? And
It
then
was
prior
after
to-
the level 3
Okay.
was delivered, and then I needed to have a fact-finding meeting with her to further investigate and get more information about what had actually happened.
Okay, and what did you find out during that additional fact-finding meeting?
I think the first thing that I was rather surprised about is that she thought I was aware of the fact that she was taking images of a penis and comparing them to another image. I was not at all aware of that. That would have been a huge red flag and required a phone conversation between the two of us. Which when you read the text messages, I'm assuming she's comparing a finding on the penis. We take pictures of bite marks, piercings, tattoos. We take pictures of many things that would have identified or had similarities between what maybe the victim saw or what was on video. But I was not clear that she was taking a picture of his actual penis to testify to whether or not that was his penis in another image.
Okay. What else did you find out during the fact-finding meeting with her?
During the fact-finding meeting, I think the other thing I learned was that her camera wasn't working. She had sent that to me briefly by text. When I questioned her about other things she could have done, she didn't really consider even borrowing another camera from a different location, which always is an option. Our loss prevention could have went and picked that camera up from another hospital site and brought it to her. And in addition, I think the big thing is that if she really felt that she was so desperate that she had to use the officer's device to take those images, again, anything outside of our normal protocol needs to be ran through me.
Do you know whether Ms. Duchow-Cross received training on HIPAA and Aurora's policies regarding the same during her employment?
Yes.
What
So the
sort of
policy,
training?
the policy regarding the SDFI, I had sent out to all of our leaders sometime late summer 2022. And that was on an SDFI, which is the camera that we utilize, confidential memo regarding risk. And it included not releasing any photos by hand to any of the law enforcement officers, but that all of the photos needed to be released via secure device. So we email the images to them. They're locked in a secure folder. They have to have a passphrase to get in the folder. Much more secure than sending an officer up and down the street with photos or a disk drive of those images.
And that was in the
And-
summer of 22?
Correct.
And when did this incident actually happen with the police officer and taking pictures of the guy's genitals?
I believe it was October. Or was it before that? Honestly, I don't know the date.
So which came first, your memo or the pictures?
My memo came first.
Aside from your memo specific to photograph issues, did Ms. Duchow-Cross ever have any other HIPAA-related training during her employment?
Yes. So all of our employees are required to complete annual training. HIPAA compliance are all a part of that, as well as our conversations about a fair and just culture and the importance of disclosing anything that is a concern. So she would have had to take that. It is mandatory. Anyone who does not take that can be terminated.
So what were the findings or conclusions from your continued investigation of the photograph issue?
So the big concern was that the individual did leave with information about our patient.
You mean
And
was that the law enforcement officer?
Law enforcement did leave our facility with unsecured images.
Was that it, or
And-
did it have his name? Because
Well, no
if
one
one
could ever
penis looks
tell
like
me.
no one penis looks like another. I've had your testimony on that. We don't know unless
That's
we've got some
correct.
discerning marks. So did the bookends leave? Do we have personally identifying information? In other
So
words,
the
name,
officer-
social security number, anything. What do we have that was released with the photo?
So I don't know because I couldn't see the images on the officer's device. He said they had been deleted at that point by the time I talked to him. And when I asked Kathy about whether or not the bookends were taken, she said, I don't know.
Okay. So there's a possibility that personally identifying information could have been released.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay,
Photographs of penises.
correct.
All right. So
What about the warrant? You've got a court order. You
Yeah.
take the
So
pictures.
let's talk about that. So oftentimes we do get a lot of court orders for evidence collection. Those, I always ask my nurses if there's any concerns about them or you're uncertain how to interpret them, you need to call our legal department. Oftentimes those, and I didn't even look, to be honest, I don't think I investigated the court order because even if they had have said you could take pictures of his genitals or his penis, that's one piece. You can take the pictures, but your ability as a forensic nurse to identify one penis over the other, even if the court tells you to, is not all, it's not accurate. It's not something that we do. So sometimes we get things in the court order like, we need you to do STD testing of this type, this type, this type. Well, maybe that's not all appropriate based on whatever's going on with that victim. So for example, I had a victim that was really ill and he was in the hospital for that. Well, at that moment, I can't do that evidence collection because his medical needs supersede that court order.
Right. No, I was just
So-
looking at the warrant in terms of HIPAA. Okay,
Yeah.
I've got an order that says take the pictures and give them to this
Mhm.
police officer.
Right.
How does
So
that
that's
how
one
does that
piece.
relate
You've
to
got
your
that order.
Yeah, you got the order to release
She
the
could
pictures
have
to the
done
court.
all of that. So she could have taken the pictures and sent them to the officer.
Right.
The big issue was that she left the facility, let him leave the facility with the images on his device. She should have deleted those images and sent them to him secured.
That's what I wanted to know. Because it's not whether or not she could identify him in court later on, whatever. That's not what we're here for. I've got a HIPAA violation on a termination, so I wanted you have to tie in
Mhm.
what you're telling me. So she didn't follow the hospital protocols of making sure it was encrypted, delete it off his device, use it, fine. Make sure they're deleted off his device, upload them to your encryption stuff, and then send them to the police authority via your encryption service in accordance with the warrant.
That's correct. And just to be
Okay.
clear, it took me a long time to learn that. That officer was on vacation when I initially called him for like 2 weeks. I mean, there was quite a bit of a delay for me getting that information. Because when Kathy was asked, how did the images leave the facility with the officers, she said, I don't know.
So what action was decided upon after the investigation?
Due to the fact that this was a HIPAA violation, in addition to the level 3 that she had previously had, she was terminated for that HIPAA violation.
Whose decision was it to terminate Ms. Duchow Cross's employment?
That was my decision.
Showing you what's already been marked, compliance exhibit 17, now compliance exhibit 10 for purposes of this hearing. Do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do. That's the separation of employment document that I created.
Does this accurately set forth the reasons for Ms. Duchow Cross's termination?
Yes.
Have you ever been responsible for terminating other employees for similar HIPAA violations?
Unfortunately, yes. I can share an example because, to be honest, I've had people terminated for a lot less than what happened in this situation. I had a nurse,
Object, this
fantastic.
was asked and answered previously. She already gave an example.
Not of
Somebody
HIPAA.
terminated regarding HIPAA.
Yeah, she did answer that question. She's terminated people for. There've been a variety of other violations because you would have liked a level. HR said no, give her a 3.
Yes, regarding theft of time. Yes.
Rest of theft of time, and you've said for HIPAA violations too, I believe also. So we can
Mhm.
move on. She's not the only person that's ever been terminated based on HIPAA.
That's correct.
All right,
I think that's been clear.
thank you. Did Ms. Duchow Cross ever report or complain to you that the number of hours she was working was putting the health or safety of patients at risk?
No,
Does Aurora have any policies covering the reporting of any patient health or safety concerns?
absolutely. Aurora has a fair and just culture, which means if a patient is in danger, we want to know about it. We don't want to wait until the patient is injured. Our teammates are instructed to reach out to someone. If she didn't feel comfortable reaching out to me, she could have always called our compliance hotline. There are all kinds of ways that patient safety issues can be reported anonymously. Very easy to say, I know of a nurse that's working in Burlington that's working too many hours. So that was never shared directly with me. I believe after she was issued the corrective action and talked to about her taking herself off the schedule, she said something at that point. I sent you an email. And I said, Kathy, let's stop right now. Show me the email. Where did you send me an email that said we had patient safety issues? And she was never able to produce that email.
During Ms. Duchow Cross's direct examination, her lawyer was asking her about the first retaliation complaint that she had filed with the Department of Workforce Development, Equal Rights Division. And there's some discussion about a April 24th, 2023 filing date. Is that something that you were aware of prior to terminating Ms. Duchow Cross's employment on May 11th of 2023?
No, absolutely not. I mean, anything that is related to workforce and development issues would not come to me. That would go to someone above my pay grade.
Legal?
Yep, our legal department. And the first person that would have been made aware of it would be her direct leader. Because remember, I have the dotted line to her. He has the direct connection. And Steve did not share anything with me about being aware that there was a complaint filed.
Okay. More generally, at the time of her separation, were you aware that she had initiated any sort of legal action whatsoever against Aurora at that point?
No, not at all. In hindsight, there was one of the calls that I was listening to, and I can't recall which one it was, but there was a call I was listening to where she mentioned discrimination. And I asked her directly, what do you feel that you're being discriminated against? And her response to me was, well, I'm not going to share that with you. I'll share that outside of here. If that was a patient safety issue, I would have expected her to share that immediately with me if she felt that's why she was being discriminated against.
You're talking about the audio recordings that Ms. Duchow Cross has produced in this case?
That's correct.
Have you listened to those?
I have.
Did you know that she was recording her conversations with you?
Absolutely not. There was a meeting where Kathy set her phone up on the counter, and then as I walked in, she slid it closer, and I immediately stated, please put your phone away. You are not allowed to record any calls. Or any of this conversation. I want to be clear that you do not have my permission to record me. And I thought it was interesting as I was listening to those recordings that one was not included.
So how many recordings did you listen to?
I believe it was either 7 or 9 of them.
As you listened to those recordings, did you ever hear Ms. Duchow Cross say anything about patient health or safety?
No.
During Ms. Duchow Cross's testimony, she testified about an email that she had sent to Steve Nelson, Dawn Greason, and Tony Quintanilla, in which she had the attachment about the number of hours she was working. Is that an email that you were aware of at any point?
I was not aware of that email, and I was not included on that email.
the attachment to the email where she said, I cannot continue to physically sustain whatever, is that something that you had ever seen before?
No, I have not.
I don't have any further questions.
Okay. Are you good, attorney? Oh, it's 4:41. See, I have no social life, so we could go till midnight. And everybody's going to be putting in 350 hours. My apologies to all. I was just in the middle of this. I lost track of time. What would you like to do? Attorney Olson, want to pick back up in the morning? Do you want to go now?
I'm willing
It's
to continue now.
4:41. So
It'll take me, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes or so. I'm not very good at estimating these things, but maybe 20 minutes.
anybody have an objection if we
Yeah,
just
Paul.
continue? You okay, Miss Anderson?
Mhm.
Okay, she's
Yes.
nodding yes.
I'm
All
good.
right. How about you, Miss Duchow Cross? Are you okay too?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Attorney Olson.
Ms. Anderson, did Ms. Duchow Cross tell you during at least one of the meetings that she on Tuesdays worked for a non-Aurora healthcare provider?
If she shared that, that's not something that I recall.
Do you know a person named Addington?
Allington?
Addington?
Anne?
Yes.
Yes.
What is her job?
Anne is a coordinator in Illinois, now a manager for our children's hospital.
Was there a time period when she was a coordinator and did not take on call?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Duchow Cross told you over and over again that she was doing exactly what she had been instructed to do for the prior 6 years before you spoke to her. Is that correct?
Not over and over again. She did say, I just don't recall it being over and over again, but she did tell me that the way she was doing her hours and the way she was taking call was something that her previous leader had okayed. There was no information regarding that, though, that we were able to verify from her other leader, who still works for Advocate Aurora.
And you said you sent out an email about pay practices and no one responded to you, correct?
No one responded to my question. If you are doing any of these pay practices or have in the past, please let me know. Yes, no one responded to that portion of the email.
And that was basically to determine whether those individuals would be subject to discipline the way that you had disciplined Ms. Duchow Cross, correct?
Oh, absolutely not, Attorney Olson. The reason we ask that question is because we want to have consistency in our pay practices.
Right.
Also, if someone was doing something that they shouldn't be doing, I need to know about it so that I can help fix that behavior. We have
Right.
a fair and just culture in our organization. And because of that, everything doesn't result in termination. If somebody
So-
said, I didn't know that I should be doing this, we wouldn't term them for that.
So none of those individuals then came forward and said, yes, I'm violating the policy that you are putting Ms. Duchow Cross on a level 3 for. Is that correct?
No one knew that she was being put on a level 3. That's not information that we would ever share with anyone. So unless she told them, no one knew she was in corrective action.
You weren't talking during, I thought you had communicated to people during meetings or in some sort of memo that what the proper practices were.
I did, but I did not include any employee information regarding anyone being in corrective action for failing to do that.
So everyone you emailed, they knew that they were not allowed to do what Ms. Duchow Cross is doing? Is that your testimony?
Yes, that's my testimony.
Okay. Let me show you an exhibit. This is exhibit C8. And red page ERD 040. I'll start at the top.
Okay, hold on, because it's going to be a completely different number from me, please. This is going to be complainant, complainant exhibit 22. And what are your Bates numbers, sir?
ERD 037. Through ERD 040.
And what is this that we're looking at?
This is in the upper left corner entitled Law Enforcement.
Okay.
And ma'am, can you identify this document?
I have never seen this form before.
You didn't review it in preparation for the hearing today?
When we were in that hearing, I was asked, when we were doing prep, I was asked if I was familiar with this form. I am not familiar with this form.
Ms. Anderson, don't reveal any further communications protected by the attorney-client privilege. She's testified that she's not familiar with the document.
Okay, in the last row on page ERD 040, you see the row that says search warrant?
Yes.
And it refers to a law enforcement officer requests record copies as part of a search warrant issued by a judge in the third column.
Yes.
Objection, lack of foundation. There's been no foundation laid as to this document. We have no idea what it is.
Yeah, I think there
Or-
needs to be some
where
foundation
it
because
came
she's
from.
already testified that she's never seen this before. She doesn't know what this is.
Okay,
And I don't even know what it is. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to call it.
okay.
So I think we need to figure out what it is before we can speak to it.
Is it accurate that the authorization from the suspect is not required when there's a search warrant?
Foundation still hasn't been laid as to what this document is, when it's from, who it's from. And she's already testified she doesn't know
I don't
what it
think
is.
he's asking. He's trying to reword. He's asking her a question that pertains to the fourth column, but without saying that's what the fourth column says. So he's asking her, is she aware that when you have a search warrant, that you don't need authorization to disclose? And she is aware or she's not. So we're not even looking at the document.
So in the case of the patients that we care for, I have discussed that with our staff before. Authorization is not required for obtaining swabs if there is a search warrant properly written, which again, I don't know what this one looked like, directing that. In the event that we have consent from a patient, we don't even really need to care whether or not there's a search warrant or a order by the court for us to do it because the patient is already consenting. In this case, the patient did consent for photos to be taken. That has nothing to do with our Aurora policies on how those photos are released.
I understand your argument. That really wasn't what I asked you. The individual that Ms. Duchow Cross would be required to notify that there's a warrant would be her direct supervisor, Mr. Steve Nelson. Is that accurate?
That is not accurate, no.
So she'd be required to report it to her dotted line person, you or someone else?
To myself, absolutely.
Is that in writing somewhere?
Yes. And she was given the form along with all of the other forensic nurses when I sent that information out.
Is that a form that you keep in your electronic files on your computer?
That is a form that I believe I have.
Okay. And you sent that out to all your nurses, you say?
That's correct.
Okay. When did you last look at that form?
2 weeks ago.
And that was something that you presented to your legal counsel? I don't want to know what you discussed with counsel.
I did not.
Okay. Showing you now complainant's exhibit 5. And are these text messages between you and Ms. Duchow Cross?
Yes.
And yours is the black text and hers is the white text on the blue background?
Yes.
Okay. And she says here, I would prefer my own photos and then to point out similarities, etc., between the two, their photos and mine. Did you understand from that she was talking about comparing her photos with their photos?
Yes. What I felt she was
Thank you.
referring to.
That responds to my question.
Okay, just to correct the record, it is, for the purposes of this hearing, complainant's exhibit number 11, ERD 016 through 18, not complainant's exhibit number 5.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay.
You had discussions during more than one meeting with Ms. Duchow Cross about her working in the community extensive hours in the evenings after her regular work shifts, correct?
No, I did not.
You don't recall having any meetings and talking about that with her?
I don't recall having intensive conversations with her about after hours working in the community. Most of our community partners are not open after hours, so
I'm sorry, you said you didn't have what kind of conversations?
Extensive.
Extensive.
Isn't that what you said? Extensive?
Okay. You had some, but not extensive?
if I've had any, I don't recall anything specific.
Did you do anything to confirm that Ms. Duchow Cross was in fact doing what she had been instructed to do over the prior 6 years
I did
in
not.
terms of her time reporting and
Her leader reached out to the previous leader who was unable to say that that's something that he had shared with her. At least that's what I was
Unable?
informed. Correct.
who is that?
I don't
Who
know if
said
it was
what-
Steve
who
or
said what to
Dawn.
whom? Sorry, go ahead.
Either Steve or Dawn reached out to a previous leader to verify whether or not this was a practice that had been ongoing. And from my understanding, they were not able to verify that.
Who was the prior leader?
I don't know.
So were they just not able to reach him? to confirm or?
I can't really recall if they reached him or not, or if his memory was limited about it. I don't know.
Okay.
But I remember when we were looking at grounds for what the corrective action, if it made sense, if she had been told by her leader to do that, that would be a different conversation for parts of it.
Did you conclude that she hadn't been told by her former leader to do it the way she had done for 6 years?
Are you asking about all aspects of everything that was in her corrective action? I'd have to go through them one by one.
No, I'm talking about her recording her work hours and telling you that that's the way she had been instructed to do it. That's the way she had always done it. She'd never been talked to, never been disciplined. Nobody ever questioned it. And that was always the way it was done.
Well, I don't know that that's the way it was always done. What I
Did
do
you-
know
did you
is that she
conclude that-
had,
I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you conclude that she was not being truthful in that regard?
no,
Now, Ms. Duchow Cross, you testified that's why she's paid $2 an hour to answer the phone. Do you know that she's paid $2 an hour to answer the phone?
our practice for our nurses when they're on call is that they're paid during that time for being on call. I don't know whether or not she put that time in to be paid on call.
What's the rate that nurses are paid to be on call? A SANE nurse in particular.
Well, it's changed. I think it's currently $3.50 an hour.
Okay. What was it during Ms. Duchow Cross's employment, if you know?
I don't recall.
And so you don't know whether she was paid that? Wouldn't that be automatic through payroll?
No, that's not how it works.
Okay. How would she get that $2 that you referred to in your testimony?
So this was something that I had a discussion with her about when we instructed her to move forward with the new system. And that is why I was calling her and asking her how many hours of on-call did she have? Because she should have had on-call hours, even if she never was called in. So I was not aware, because Kathy never expressed that as a concern, that she wasn't putting in her $2 an hour for her on-call time. When we were
On
having
what-
our conversation,
Go ahead.
when we were having our conversation with Human Resources, they also reminded her that she needs to be recording the time that she's on call on the schedule, so that her leader, myself, and the emergency department staff knew when she was on call.
On what date did you learn that she was not working on call hours?
The date of the email that I asked her several questions about being on call and what
What-
hours she had worked, that was the first I knew that she had taken herself off of the schedule.
What email are you referring to?
There's an email trail where I asked her to clarify what hours she had been on call. And she told me there were no patients. I said, well, I still need to know what your hours were. And she said, it's correct what's in the system. And we kind of went round and round about that.
What date was that?
I don't recall.
This on-call schedule thing, is there like a sign-up list? That
It's
you're gonna be, you know I work salary Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. However, I'm willing to be on call. Are there certain hours that you will be on call? Is it a entire shift? Is it a weekend? How does that work?
So everyone else, other than Kathy, puts themselves on a schedule. If there are holes in the schedule, what the leader will write is call so-and-so during that time period, which is usually themselves unless they're out of town on PTO. So our nurses are expected to sign up in our electronic system for call. That is not a program that Kathy ever used. Even on the calendar schedules, Kathy wouldn't write herself in as on call, which also complicated things for us to know when she was on call and when she wasn't. How many calls did she take? How many calls didn't she take? we didn't have that information because Kathy wasn't putting it on the schedule.
But she's only going to get nurse pay if she actually comes in to the facility to see somebody.
That's correct.
Otherwise, you're just answering the phone, answering the question to whoever is called, give them their answer, whether it's police or Women's and Children Horizons, whoever it is, blah, blah, blah. And then you hang up the phone. Life is good. You're already getting
That's
paid for
correct.
that because you signed up for the on-call period, whether it's
That's
$2
correct.
an hour or now $3.50. It's only when you physically come into the building, you physically lay eyes on somebody and administer care that you would then get that same nurse rate of pay, whatever it is, because I don't think anybody's ever said, at least not today, what that is. But
That is correct.
okay. All right. Sorry, Attorney Olson.
That memo that you said you looked at a couple of weeks ago that talked about protocol for photographs.
It wasn't a protocol for photographs. It was a protocol for image transferring and how we handle our images for SDFI.
All right. And Ms. Duchow Cross asked for a copy of that a number of times, correct?
That's not correct. She did ask for a copy of it. That memo was confidential at that point. I did share the talking points from that memo with all of the leaders.
You never
She didn't
gave
ask me
her,
for,
you never gave her
I
a
don't
copy
recall
of
her
that.
asking me for a copy of that one, but that was a confidential memo that had been created between myself and IT. It was something that they did not want released because of the risk to our organization. So that wasn't something we would just send out copies of to everyone.
Well, this was a confidential investigation when her job was in jeopardy, and you were accusing her of violating a memo that you had issued in, you said, you waffled a bit. What was it? Summer of 2022, right?
It was September. I just looked at the memo.
Oh, so you've got it on your screen now?
No,
And-
not on my screen now, but I looked in my email to see what date.
Oh, okay. And so that was not something that you were even willing to show to her, even if you didn't give her a copy?
They did see it. When we were in the meeting, I put the whole memo up on the screen and we walked through it point by point. But
No,
when
but
she
what I'm-
called and asked me for a copy of it that had deemed to be confidential by our IT department, that was not my decision. Therefore, I didn't feel comfortable sending that to her.
What I'm asking you is, when you disciplined her, she said, I never got it. I'm not aware of that. Will you share it with me? Because that happened, what was it, a year earlier, several months
It was
earlier?
not a year, just a few months.
Okay. But you recall that she told you, I don't recall ever getting such a memo or you going over that with me, correct?
Yes, so all of our forensic nursing leaders were present at that meeting, including Kathy.
Right. So if you went over it with all the nurses, what was preventing you from sharing it with her a second time?
I could have shared it with her on my screen. That's not what she wanted. She wanted me to send her a copy of it. That information was deemed to be confidential by our IT department. It wasn't mine to share.
And you didn't offer to share it with her on your screen a second time, correct?
No, she did not ask for that.
It's not confidential anymore, is it?
It is.
It's still confidential.
Yes, that form was never released to our forensic nurses or anyone. We currently are working to migrate away from that company because of the safety issues. But our IT department felt very strongly about us putting out a document explaining our weaknesses, because they are weaknesses and they could certainly lead to someone getting images that they should not have.
When was Simpler installed?
It went out live at different locations at different times, so I'm not sure which one you're referring to. In my
At the-
region, it went out in, I want to say February.
Were there glitches in it at the time that it was
Of what year?
operative? at the time it was operative and relevant to Ms. Duchow Cross?
I don't know what glitches it might have had. It's not a system that I swipe in and out of. But I did direct her when she said that she was having difficulty to reach out to her IT and get that straightened out. In addition, anyone punching in or out at that time still had access to our telephone system and can punch themselves in and out that way.
You actually removed Ms. Duchow Cross from on-call duty, correct?
No,
You didn't tell her no more on-call?
that was after she told me no more on call. And what I put in my email to her was actually saying, until we have a process figured out, which meant signing up on the sheet for on call, making sure everyone knew when she was on call, because the pay practices that had been happening earlier were not correct. So I did not want her to go back to deciding she was going to take call because it was convenient for her. I said, let's wait until we get a plan in place.
So you agree that there needed to be a plan. Did you tell her that you thought that she was working too many hours
No,
in one of your meetings? You never said words to that effect, that you didn't want her working as many on-call hours as she was?
I think what I said to her was that we care about her health and well-being. And so working 24/7 and on call every day, every night is not healthy for anyone. And
Right.
that was one of the reasons why I had been working with our leadership team to ensure she has coverage. And you'll see in the voicemails that or in the recordings that I was listening to, you hear me say that to her over and over again, that we care about her health and she should not be working like that.
Now, you had testified on direct exam that Ms. Duchow Cross said that she had emailed you about a patient safety issue, and you said, no, I never got such an email. Please send
She
it
did
to
not
me.
email me regarding patient safety. Her working too many hours and patient safety are two different things. For
thought-
someone, working 3 days a week might be too much, depending on what they have going on in their life. That doesn't mean that it's a patient safety issue.
The notes I have, and the transcript will bear out whatever the testimony was, is that she had said that she had emailed you about a patient safety issue,
Mhm.
and you said, if you emailed me, send me the email,
That's correct.
and she never did that. Is that
That's
right?
correct.
So you knew she was raising a patient safety issue.
This
'Cause
was
she
after
talked
her
about it.
corrective action. So this was not, she wasn't even
Right.
doing on call at that time. So no, that
It
was
was
not
a-
regarding patient safety.
It was, so it was after the corrective action, but it was obviously before her termination, correct?
That's correct.
So she claimed to you that she had sent you an email about patient safety prior to the discipline. Yes?
Prior to which discipline, or there's,
The level 3. She is only disciplined once, right?
well, termination is a form of discipline as well.
All right. To the level 3. Prior to the level 3, she told you that prior to that, she had sent you an email about patient safety, right?
I would need to see the date on that email. I do not believe that that was prior to that corrective action.
No, I'm talking about the conversation when she told you.
You asked me if the conversation was before the corrective action. I do not believe it was. So I would have to see the date on the email to know.
Let me back up half a step just to make sure we're on the same page. Prior to Ms. Duchow Cross's termination, she told you that she had emailed you about patient safety,
Correct.
and she told you at least that that email had occurred prior to the time that she received the level 3.
She did not state that when we were having that conversation. As a
Was that
matter of
your
fact, what
understanding?
she said to me was, let me look. We were all on a Teams meeting, myself and Dawn and her. And I said, okay, let's pause. Kathy, put in my name and search for what you sent me and send it to me so that I can see it. She was not able at that time to produce any email that she had told me there was a patient safety concern. Nothing. And I said that to her. There's a very clear recorded conversation that she recorded about that. I did not ever receive, nor was she able to produce on that meeting, an email that she told neither myself, Steve, or Dawn that there was a patient safety issue.
All right. And in this document labeled ERD 330, expectations effective 3/30/23. This is an email that you wrote to Ms. Duchow Cross. Is that correct?
That's correct. It was effective that date, but I sent it to her on the 31st. Yes.
Okay. And you say, following our conversation yesterday, was the conversation on the 29th?
Our conversation was on the 30th, and I outlined those expectations to her in the conversation, but I wanted to make sure that I sent them to her in writing so she was clear
Okay.
about them.
And this is where you say there will be no on-call until a new arrangement is developed and communicated. Is that right?
That's correct. There was another individual that was able to take call, and essentially what she did was ask that person to cover all of the call. And just as we wouldn't want her doing that, I couldn't ask or expect another team member to cover 3 different sites. At that time, might have been 4, to cover multiple sites for one person 24/7 every single day of the week. And that is why I said at this point, no on call for her until we develop a plan that makes sense and that is fair and equitable. We're not going to have just one person taking all the call.
Why could one individual not cover all the on-call time?
For the same reason that Kathy says she didn't want to cover it. She felt it was too much. So if I have one team member telling me that feels like it's too many hours, as a leader, it's my responsibility to make sure that I do better, not just pass it off to someone else. So at that point, I said no on call for Kathy. And this leader that actually was willing to step in and help her was a newer leader. So again, she didn't have the expertise, was relatively new to our department. She had been a SANE for a while, but she was new to our Aurora department. She still was getting oriented to her sites. So to ask her to step in and do all of the coverage at Kathy's as a new leader, I just did not want her doing that. We don't want to cause burnout for anybody new.
Based on the comments that Ms. Duchow Cross was making in these meetings about having someone from the outside look at what was happening, and she was telling you specifically that she was being discriminated against and retaliated against.
No,
You
not
believe-
specifically.
She used these specific words, I believe I'm being discriminated against and retaliated against. And she said that to you repeatedly, correct?
She said it to me once in a meeting, and she was not able to tell me how she was being discriminated against. So that's why I said specifically no.
I appreciate the argument, but I didn't ask for the commentary. So focus on my question, please. My question was, she told you that she was being discriminated against and retaliated against, yes?
She told myself and Dawn that she felt she was being discriminated against. I don't recall retaliation. I remember discrimination.
And then you asked for detail, yes?
Yes.
And she said, no, I will have someone on the outside of the company deal with this, correct?
No, what she said is I'll talk to someone else that's outside of here.
And you knew from that she was going to take legal action against the company, correct?
No, how would I know that she's taking legal action based on that conversation?
So
She didn't
based
tell
on
me she
her,
was talking to an attorney.
okay. So you had no thought whatsoever that she was going to take legal action against Aurora, is that correct?
I had no knowledge of it, nor did I have any fear of that, because what we
Uh-huh.
were doing was in alignment with our
Uh-huh.
policies. Nothing was discriminatory.
Uh-huh. That's all I have for you. Thank you.
Any rehabilitation? Attorney Casey.
Just quickly, Attorney Olson, could you take the share screen down? Showing you, it's response exhibit 5, or sorry, no, that's complainants exhibit
11.
11. Thank you, Judge. The text messages between you and Ms. Duchow Cross. Before you were cut off, you wanted to provide a little bit of explanation about the context of the text messages. What were you going to say?
Thank you. What I wanted to share is that we do take images of penises. When we take images of penises, it is always related to a finding that we see. We don't just randomly take pictures of penises to compare them to other pictures. That is outside of our scope completely. There is no training for that. There's no education related to that. So when she asked me about, or I think I made the comment about comparing them, how can you compare? How can you say it's his penis if you don't have the other picture? My point to that was assuming that she's taking a picture of something unique or different about that penis, because at no time have our saints been taught that they are able to compare images to say that penis is the same one on that picture. That is completely outside of our scope. She could have left that to the police could have left that to the jury to decide, but it's not her role to speak as an expert on whether or not that's the same penis.
In these text messages, did she ever tell you anything about taking the photographs using the law enforcement officer's device?
No. Nor did she tell me she was comparing penises.
Did Ms. Duchow Cross ever use the words discrimination or retaliation in conjunction with anything having to do with patient health or safety?
No.
Hypothetically, if Ms. Duchow Cross had ever raised a concern about patient health or safety at any point, whether that regarded the number of hours she was working or something completely different, what would you have done?
Intervened. A patient safety concern is a huge deal. I know at one time she said, well, I took an oath and that's why I want to come in and make those calls for patients because they need to be cared for. We're all nurses. All of her leaders are nurses, and all of us care about the patients that are being served. So that's a very vulnerable population. I take my role extremely serious. As you can imagine, with the background in law enforcement, I know the implications of not caring correctly for our sexual assault victims. I do this work and have done this work for over 20 years because I care about our victims.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay. Then Miss Anderson, you are
Yes.
done, but you're
All
here
right.
because you're stuck with us because you are
I
the
am.
respondent representative. So no reprieves for you. All right. It's 5:20. I'm gonna let everybody go and
I don't
go
have any
eat
further
stuff.
witnesses, Judge, that we're going to arrest. I'm not
Okay.
going to call any more witnesses.
That's fine, but I still want to hear some brief argument from both of you. I don't know if Attorney Olson has any rebuttal witnesses. Let's say we come back in the morning, give everybody a chance to summarize what it is they want to say, come up with some sort of argument. Gentlemen, did you, and then we'll talk about post-hearing briefs.
That sounds fine.
Okay, so 9 o'clock again? Is that too early for everybody, or is that still good?
I think the meeting's for 9:30, but I mean, I could
Oh,
do.
I'm sorry, 9:30, 9:30, whatever it was. I'm not reinventing the wheel. I couldn't remember. I log in around 6, so I'm here anyway. It's just how many cups of coffee have I had before then? Is that an okay time for you, Miss Anderson?
Yes, that works.
Miss Dugal Cross? Feel like I'm playing Hollywood Squares, dating myself here as I'm looking to see who's where. I need 2 more squares here, and then we'll have the whole thing. We've got Attorney Olson in the center. So, and Miss Reichel and Miss, well, all of you, I think nobody's old enough to understand Hollywood Squares. Okay.
Oh, I watch
Everybody.
Hollywood Squares.
No, I guarantee I'm still older. Okay. All right. We're going to call it a day for today then. Thank you, everyone. And I will see everyone back here bright and early at 9:30. And we will go from there.
Okay.
Sound like a
thank you.
plan?
Okay.
Sounds good. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.